Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. It is our special year-end edition, and I am joined by two of my Winnipeg Sun colleagues. We have Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba, and Lawrence Pinsky, KC, who is a former human rights adjudicator. Gentlemen, we want to talk about various things that happened throughout 2025, maybe some of the bigger stories. I did a column in the Winnipeg Sun. You can see it at winnipegsun.com about what I thought was the biggest story for 2025. We'll talk a little bit about that. But now, since we're taping on December 28th, we should talk about what happened at a major mall in Toronto where it has been taken over. It was taken over on Boxing Day. On Boxing Day, they take over the entire mall, and they have protests and people yelling and screaming and screaming out intifada, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's just it is nonsense. And from what I can find out at this particular point, nobody was arrested. I mean, that's private property. If I'm the owner of that mall, I'm calling in the cops. I'm calling in the cavalry. Let's take them all out in handcuffs if we have to. But really, Royce, you and I talked about this at the start before we started taping, is that it's really enough is enough. Where are the political leaders putting a stop to this?
Yeah, Canada has been remarkably tolerant of these protests, these associations, even as they've escalated. In nature, even as the language has escalated, even as the actions have escalated. In this case, blocking celebrations of Christmas, blocking a mall where people are trying to go shopping with their families in wintertime, and it's gone out of control. You know, I've given a few examples over the last year of things that I thought were particularly egregious. You know, protesters outside of Jewish seniors' homes in Toronto. You have these kinds of bands of pro-Palestine protesters marching through neighborhoods that are identified as Jewish neighborhoods in Toronto, where there's a big Jewish population, the intent of which is clearly to intimidate and harass the people that live there. No protesters march through suburban areas chanting slogans unless they're trying to have some effect on the people that live there. And so I think in 2026, I'd like to see governments do more to enforce order, to ensure that these protests aren't intimidating, that they're not harassing, and that they don't impinge upon Canadians' ability to do the things that we want to do over the holidays or any time of the year. There's always going to be conflicts in other parts of the world. There's always going to be war, conflicts. That doesn't mean that we have to shut down Canadian malls, shut down Canadian streets, and have Canadians harassed as a result.
Now, before you go, Lawrence, I want to ask you a question, and Royce, maybe you'll get your comments on it afterwards. I wonder if you pulled most of these people aside and asked them what they're protesting, if they even could tell you what it is they're protesting. Do they even know, or are they just filled with hate?
There's a lot to unpack in the question you ask and in everything you talk about. It's called the intifada, and they say globalized intifada. What that means, what the intifada was, which most people I think now know, is a violent uprising that targeted and killed Jewish civilians and non-Jewish civilians in Israel. And there were two intifadas. Arguably, this is the third, and they have in fact globalized it. We saw it in, as you said, Eaton Centre, Toronto, but Christmas markets all over Europe, in Germany and across Europe, England and elsewhere, have been shut down because what's happened is that they have globalized terror and political leadership across the West, most recently and most violently exploding at a Bondi Beach in Australia, has done nothing to prevent it. And there's tons of sections of the criminal code, I shouldn't say tons, enough sections of the criminal code that actually make what they're doing illegal. It is, in fact, terror. It is hate. A lot of these people don't know, like they shout from the river to the sea. They don't know, and it's been proven, they don't know what sea or what river. But what they do know is this DEI mentality, this woke mentality, for lack of a better term, that says that certain people are enemies. And that follows through a strain of anti-Semitism in this case, but also anti-Westernism, frankly, that has woven its evil way through our societies, and our government leaders, usually of the liberal or left variety, haven't had the sense to say no. There's just, I don't know if you're aware of this, the Prime Minister of Australia came down an aircraft after visiting the United States wearing a Joy Division shirt. Joy Division, I don't know if you know this, was a Nazi division where they had Jewish women that they kept against their will to act as prostitutes for the Wehrmacht and for the Gestapo. And he knew it. It's proven he knew it, and he wore that shirt anyway. In fact, he asked the media, "Don't film me," because he knew what he was wearing.
Well, this is because they wear masks too, right? I mean, I have absolutely zero tolerance for anybody that wants to do these protests and they wear a mask. That is the coward. They're cowards. It's cowards.
Well, beyond wearing a mask, they should not be allowed to do this. It is terror. Yes. It is criminal harassment. It is mischief. There's numerous sections. And my point really is that these liberal and leftist leaders don't have the courage of their convictions to defend peace, order, and good government, to defend Western values. They're betraying, in my view, their constitutional duties. Olivia Chow's another one. I don't recall a worse form of lack of governance, really, in Canadian or Western history. It's as if Neville Chamberlain's group back in World War II, as if there was no Churchill, only Chamberlain's, just a complete dereliction of duty. And I've said this before, when they target Jewish people, it's only Jewish people first.
Yeah.
It's Western values. It's Christian. I mean, this is Christmas.
Yes. This isn't a Jewish thing. When you show up at the Boxing Day celebration like that, I don't see that as a Jewish thing. I see this now going against Christians. And we're seeing that in different parts of the world, right? We've talked about that there are different parts of the world where Christians are being killed en masse. And no politician are talking about that. And I think, Royce, you and I, again, we had that discussion that there's no leadership there. All we ever hear is our thoughts and prayers are with blah, blah, blah. Not stop, not we're going to take action, not you're breaking the law, not that it won't be tolerated. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the family or those that were impacted by this. That's a cop-out saying, in my opinion. I'm sorry. That's not what I want to hear from a leader.
One exception, though, is President Trump having just bombed Nigeria.
Right.
And the folks who were killing Christians, innocent Christians in Nigeria, an Islamist attack against really thousands and thousands of Christians in Nigeria. President Trump just bombed them. That was last week. That was Christmas, I believe, that he did that. But nothing from Carney, nothing from Mr. Canoe, nothing from all these fake, horrible lack of leadership people. Mr. Canoe, just to bring it to Manitoba for a second, and then I'll be quiet, and Royce, you can go. But he goes to Jewish institutions and says, "Look how great I am. I appointed an anti-Semitism crown." Turns out no one was appointed. I asked him point blank, who was appointed and when? He said the name of the crown was in his phone. Nobody's been appointed as far as I can tell. Absolutely nobody. It's the most hollow, meaningless lack of leadership, and we see it at the provincial and federal and in Toronto at the municipal level. And it's going to be the end of Western civilization if we allow this Islamism to continue. And I distinguish Islamism from people who happen to be Muslim.
All right. Well, you've brought it to Manitoba. So let me play for you quick. This is a greeting that Premier Wab Kinew of Manitoba put out on social media. So take a look at this greeting.
The holidays are about being home and about being together. When I look back at 2025, the thing that stands out to me the most is how Manitobans, we kept showing up for one another. Through the worst wildfire season on record, through the blizzard where we had to push our neighbors out of snowbanks, to when Donald Trump challenged our sovereignty and we pushed back, flying the maple leaf, saying we'll never be the 51st state. This has been a year for the ages. I hope that everyone has a wonderful holidays. And remember, The decorations are nice. The gifts are special. The carols are amazing. But the thing that really matters during the holidays is that we all get to be together. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Okay, so there's his big social media, and we know he loves, like he'll go anywhere where there's a camera. If you have a camera at an event, Wab Canoe will be there. If there's going to be media, Wab Canoe will be there. It used to be a joke in the media that if you want reporters to show up, serve food. Now, if you want politicians to show up, have some cameras available, and they're certainly going to come out and participate in the event. So you see in that video, he'll say everything about the holidays. He talks about carols, about being with family, all of this, but he won't say Merry Christmas. Now, if you check out his social media, he'll say Happy Ramadan.
Yeah.
He won't say Merry Christmas.
You know, it's kind of interesting. It wasn't that long ago, even when I was a kid, that Canada was a predominantly Christian country. That's changed very quickly in recent years and recent decades. But when that was the case, I think there was a kind of well-meaning sense among people that you had to kind of include religious minorities, you know, and so kind of Merry Christmas, it was seen to exclude people. I disagreed with that at the time, but I think it kind of came from a good place, you know, that you wanted to include people that were minorities in Canada. Canada is a very different place now. Canada is a multi-religious society, multi-ethnic, multi-religious. And so my view is that if you're going to wish people from other religions, other faith traditions, you know, happy holiday, happy Hanukkah, happy this, happy Ramadan, happy this, happy that, then there's really no reason not to be wishing people Merry Christmas unless you kind of feel anti-Christian. There's this kind of anti-Christian element of some parts of Canadian society. And so I think in a multi-religious society, we shouldn't be afraid to recognize the different holidays or the different occasions that these faith groups have. And if you're not willing to say Merry Christmas, that's a concern. That's actually a red flag to me. It kind of makes me wonder what's actually informing this. What are the beliefs that cause you to not want to say Christmas for some reason?
I want to get into a different topic now. We spent some time on this one, and where we want to talk about various topics. I want to talk about the number one story for 2025. I wrote an article, as I said at the start, it's at winnipegsun.com, about the number one story for 2025 may shock you, or it may not. And my column was really that the number one story is that nothing. The government did nothing. At all three levels of government in Winnipeg, or you look at Manitoba, you look at the Canadian government, they did nothing. What can you point to, gentlemen? Can you point to anything, any kind of movement forward, any kind of relief for Canadians? Can you point to anything this government has done at any level to make Canada better? In fact, I believe the biggest story should be that all politicians in Canada did an excellent job hiding behind the rock so that no one could see them. No one could judge them. No one could hold them accountable because they didn't do anything. How can you hold me accountable? I didn't do anything. That is what I think is the number one story of 2025.
So the number one story is ineptitude. It's not that they're hiding because they're always in front of the cameras, you pointed out, but they're inept.
Yeah.
I'm really racking my brain trying to think of a single accomplishment of the government of Canada first. Let's start with the government of Canada. A single accomplishment. But before I do that, let me say, if I haven't said it already, Merry Christmas to both of you. I know it's late. I always say Merry Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah.
They're Jewish. Thank you. And I say Happy Hanukkah to Jewish people. I think it's nuts that people are unwilling to say it, but it's symptomatic of a degradation of society, really, and a self-hate among certain folks, Western people who are very problematic. Now, back to this. What did the government of Canada accomplish? They accomplished an almost $80 billion deficit. They accomplished they did do an MOU with Alberta that both does and doesn't do anything.
Oh, don't forget the criminal code, mandatory minimums without the mandatory.
Mandatory minimums without the mandatory. They did that. They might have criminalized teaching the Bible under Bill C-9.
Right, and that's important.
They did that. Oh, and they also gave themselves the power to overrule any piece of legislation that would have constrained them. They did that as well. That didn't get a lot of coverage. I really want to think of something positive. Royce, over to you. I'm drawing a blank.
That's a pretty comprehensive summary. We also got an announcement from the Prime Minister that they are negotiating with the Americans. So we're at the pre-negotiation stage. So that's going well. Tariff relief, which we were supposed to have in July, is we're not even working on that. We're working on that. You know, we know that this legislative session that the Liberals just went through at the federal level is the least legislatively productive session in modern history. And yet Mark Carney was elected saying that he was going to get things done. What was it? The speed of light? Pipelines were going to get built. Big projects were going to get built. Things were going to get negotiated. Tariffs were going to come off of our goods, you know, at speeds not previously seen. And instead we get a government that did
nothing.
They got a few things out the gate that Lawrence pointed out. But it really does seem that government is paralyzed to some extent. And I think you're right, Kevin. Politicians need to start using their power for the right things. You know, they use their power for the wrong things. But when it comes to dealing with the real issues that we have in this country, they're reticent. They don't want to use the power of the state. I'd like to see a lot more of that in 2026.
You know, I talked to a politician the other day that I used to be in office with, and I won't say their name because it's not fair. They're still in politics. But I had mentioned to them that they need to stop, you know, the issue of overspending and you know, start taking a look at the debt. And I got a pushback saying, listen, I don't like talking about that kind of stuff because a lot of my voters depend on government checks, or a lot of my voters want to see this, or a lot of my voters want to see that. So I stay out of that stuff, Kevin. And I said, well, you know, why would you do that? Why did you get into office in the first place then? You know,
Yep.
why did you really go there? Because you're right, Royce. I went into politics, not that I'm anything special. I went in thinking that we could make a difference, that we could make life better for people. And that's what you're supposed to be there for. You're supposed to put in legislation that makes life better. But I was shocked listening to this politician who I thought would be fiscally responsible tell me that no, we just have to, you know, we're probably going to have to look at raising taxes, and you know, as the world changes, we need to take more taxes. I said,
Kevin,
well,
was this a conservative?
yeah, you're going to hit a ceiling here, buddy. You're going to hit a ceiling.
Yeah.
You're going to hit a ceiling where you can't take more taxes. And let me tell you something. You've already broken through that ceiling for the majority of Canadians. But you're afraid to talk about fiscal responsibility? Because my thing was, you need to stop giving money all across the world to all these different groups and organizations until you fix up our own finances. You know, you're using your credit card to buy gifts for people you don't know, and I have to pay the bill. No way. Did not want to talk about it. And a nice person.
Yeah, too nice. That's the problem.
Yeah.
We'll deal with these issues one way or the other. We'll deal with them now, or we'll deal with them in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and it'll be that much worse when we deal with them in the future. You know, 2025, I'll maybe kind of remember it as a time when the chickens kind of came home to roost for this country on a wide range of issues, on things like immigration, on some of the indigenous land claim issues that we're seeing in British Columbia, now in other provinces in New Brunswick. These are issues.
Before you go any further, did you see the latest one where they don't want people in their airspace?
No.
What's going on there was a company in some tourist company or something in BC. A helicopter would fly over, you know, going to certain destinations. They want that stopped. You have to get their approval to use their airspace.
Yeah. So on a lot of these issues, the pattern that we've seen is politicians have not been on top of them. They have been, frankly, kind of lily-livered on these issues. They let them get out of control, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. And so on issues like immigration, we used to see consensus on this issue, and now immigration is actually a contested, politicized issue in Canada. It shouldn't be that way. A well-managed immigration system should be something that all Canadians can agree on. Reconciliation should be something that we can all agree on in Canada. But these things have been mismanaged by, you know, not just, you know, several generations of politicians who are afraid to get into difficult take contrary stances on difficult issues. And now 2025 is the year where we've seen these things come to the fore, politicians' mismanagement of these issues. And so we need to think about the quality of the people that are willing to run for office, and also the quality of the people that we elect. I'm an admirer of politicians. I've spent my whole life, writing about, watching about, kind of admiring politicians. In the last year and a half, my views have been revised. We need to do better when it comes to elected politics in this country.
I want to go back for a second. The thing that stands out, there's so much. I would tell you, Royce, it's not that they're too nice. It's that they're addicted to the corrosive nature of welfare. And it's spineless, and it's absolutely wrong, in my view. Governments have shown a remarkable tolerance for the intolerant. And we saw that, just to bring it back to Eaton Center or Eaton Place, whatever it's called, in Toronto. We've seen it on the streets of Winnipeg. We've seen it across the country. Just this tolerance for people who are intolerant. We saw it in that Cowichan land decision, frankly, because the way that was handled by the government of British Columbia was really atrocious. I should tell you that there was recently a Court of Appeal decision in the Maritimes that took the opposite approach and said that Indigenous land claims don't trump title. So it will, as we knew before, it will eventually find its way up to the Supreme Court, because now we have a conflicting decision. And there's lots of good commentary in that Court of Appeal decision. Anyway, that's the problem. Royce, you talked about immigration. It's been a complete disaster. I hate saying that. I got to tell you, I've said it so much over the last, number of years, but it's true. But I don't want to say it. I don't want Canada to be in a disastrous state. I want us to get a win. I want us to be united in values that make sense, but we're just not anywhere near that page. I wish we were. And Kevin, your comment about a conservative that says they don't want to talk about the deficit or debt, and that it's almost like a conservative equivalent of the budget will balance itself. It's a corrosive, addictive sort of mind that really, as Royce said, the chickens will come home to roost. Maybe they have already. I'm not sure they have already, because when you look at the polls, that same mentality is not really losing. There's a little bit of shifting in the polls, but not significant enough. And we still, we saw the corrosive nature of conservatives crossing the floor to the Liberals, which, rest assured, they still, our friends in the Liberal Party are still going after them, hunting conservatives, inducing them, enticing them in ways that might well be breaches of the criminal code, and certainly should cause people to take civil actions against those people. I think it's a huge problem. I did come up in my mind with one pathway to success, I think, for the feds, which is that they've reversed course a little bit on relations with India, which I think is a good thing, but it's very nascent, very, very, very early stages. And as to politicians who ought to be better, I couldn't agree more. And Kevin, when you talked about a conservative saying that, as you may have seen, I slapped my head and, oh my God, how could that be a conservative? Yeah. We do need better politicians.
Nobody
was it federal or provincial politics or local?
I don't want to say.
Okay.
Because I don't want the person to feel bad.
He said a former colleague.
Yeah, figure it out from that.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's talk about immigration for a couple of seconds, because we're seeing some incredible stuff happening in the state of Minnesota. Incredible stuff that I venture to say some may be actually happening in Canada when you look at groups that are getting money and what they're getting money for. But we also have to talk about the fact that now we're starting to see people come across the border again. And this just happened last week or this week in Quebec. Migrants, immigrants walking across the border into Canada. And I think when you see Trump start to put up his fight against what's happening in Minnesota State, that we're going to see even more people again walking across the border. And the last time this happened, when Trudeau was there, it cost you and I billions of dollars We paid for everything, and they basically broke the law coming into this country illegally, and we didn't check them out. And I'm afraid that we're just sitting on the edge of that happening once again, especially from Minnesota.
So, Kevin, I think you're exactly right. The state apparently of corruption from the Somali population, and again, I'm not condemning or whatever all people from Somalia, but the Somali population, which I believe the largest presence in North America is in Minnesota, has now been caught with its hand in the corrupt cookie jar to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. Mr. Trump has targeted that state and that corruption. If it's true, quite rightly, and it looks pretty true. There's a fair bit of stuff on social media that is really appalling. Where does Minnesota border? Manitoba and Ontario. So guess what we're going to be seeing across the board? And it's hugely problematic. Not only that, there's a safe third country agreement, as you all know, so that if someone comes from the U.S., which is considered a safe country, CBSA is supposed to return them down to the States. But there's a loophole. If they're in Canada for 14 days or more, CBSA can't do it. So if they hide for 14 days, guess what happens? And meanwhile, while they're here, guess what also happens? Even if they have a false or a refugee claim, this is remarkable as well, Canada will pay for their Medicare and dental care to the tune, last, I believe in 2024, was approximately $800 million, almost $1 billion, while Canadians wait for 8 to 12 hours in emergency wards, can't get treatment, can't get tests. It's such a disgrace. And when Mr. Carney said he's going to put, I think he said, what were they, 1,000 CBSA officers? I don't believe he's done that. I don't believe any mainstream media has followed up to say, where are these people? Where are
they have DEI hiring practices. How are they going to get to that? And I'm not saying that to be facetious. That they have DEI hiring practices for the Canadian border. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to find people? This entire thing to me is just like we're playing. It's like we're playing hide and seek with people that come across the border. If you're smart enough to stay away from us for 14 days, boy, we want you to be Canadian, because that shows us something. That it doesn't make any sense to me. Why it continues? Why? I mean, you talked about the medical costs, but it was in Ontario, Lawrence, where they publicly said they spent over $1 billion on hotels and meals and so on. And I can tell you from being a sitting member in Manitoba that the Manitoba government paid millions of dollars on hotels and meals and stuff for immigrants coming into the city. And here's the funniest part. Some of them come in properly and they follow the rules, but we pay for them for a year. We pay everything. And at that point, they leave. They go to a different province. Because they have
actually... That's in some cases a positive outcome because, again, we import foreign conflicts. The crime rates among some of these folks are sadly unbelievable. Not everybody, but this broken immigration system that is a Trudeau-Carney leftover is unbelievable. And they've got to get a handle on it because we just can't afford it, either societally or financially.
Yeah, but look at who I can't remember his name right now, Royce, and maybe you can help me, but the person that Carney has appointed to be the ambassador to the United States is one of the people that Trudeau was on the Trudeau team and believed that Canada should be at a 100 million population by, I don't know, what was it, 2030, 2050, whatever it was, some ridiculous number. How is he going to be taken seriously at a table in the United States negotiating on behalf of Canada?
Well, he's one of the architects of the most disastrous policies of the Trudeau era, broken immigration system. You know, the thing about the country, the thing about Canada is that if you want to have a kind of functioning modern country, you need to control your borders. You know, you need to know who's coming, who's going. That's just basic. And that in the Trudeau years, we kind of, for some reason, that became a contested issue. That if you thought that it wasn't good that people were just crossing the border and then were allowed to stay, that was somehow a bad thing. But of course, it's a terrible thing given the loopholes in the agreement that Lawrence identified. We can hire thousands and thousands of border guards, CBSA agents, but the truth of the matter is that we have the longest unprotected border in the history of the world in the United States. If people are going to come, and if they have an incentive to come by this 14-day rule, they're going to do it. And we saw it just a few days ago, again in Quebec, where people came over frozen half to death because of this incentive that the government has and that they have left to sit there. You know, if that was gone, we wouldn't have people being endangered. We wouldn't have children that could freeze to death. They're trying to cross into Manitoba or really anywhere in Canada right now, with the exception of the Lower Mainland. The government should fix it. They should have fixed it a decade ago. When Trudeau was in power, there was the Roxham Road crossing in Quebec. That was basically an open crossing for illegal migrants, people that could come in and that could make asylum claims as a result of that outside of a normal port of entry. And of course, the real problem with this...
Can I ask you something on that, Royce? The people that are coming across, they're coming across because they're illegally in the United States now, right? And they're afraid of being deported. They've already broken the law, and now they want to do it again.
Yeah, some of that, not exclusively, I don't think.
Yeah, no, not all of them, but I mean, so there was an example of Haitians. Haitians had a special status in the United States. When that was going to come to an end, and they were going to have to leave, and so some of them, hired these coyotes or these smugglers to get them to Canada, and so they came here instead. The problem with all this, of course, is that Canada should accept asylum claimants. We should accept refugees. There's wide consensus on this. What we shouldn't accept is people that don't follow the rules for coming here. And again, like allowing this to proliferate, illegal crossings into the country, what has been the effect? It's turned the asylum system into a political football. And the Canadians have less confidence in our system. They have less confidence. They're concerned about these issues, whereas in the past that wasn't the case at all.
But doesn't it create more, hang on a second, Lawrence, doesn't it create more division? Because I know if you go through a lot of the political contributions and stuff, not to politicians, but if you look like where the government gives hundreds of thousands of dollars to an Islamic group in Manitoba to have their own social services, right? So it's almost like we're paying to divide the country. Right, because you don't give money to a Christian social services, but you give one to an Islamic. And I'm not, again, I'm not saying this to be rude. These are the facts. This creates division because I think it's being manipulated by whatever force, but we are now dividing people into different groups instead of being one country. Instead of being Canadian, we're dividing it all around, and we're giving money to different groups like exactly what is happening in Minnesota State.
Kevin, you said part of what I was going to say, so thank you for that. No, you're exactly correct. Not only that, the government of Canada has given money. There's a lot to talk about here. The government of Canada has given money to a group that publishes how you cheat this immigration system, that it's available online to come in for over 14 days. And then you can actually claim status, even if you're from a safe third country. And Canada hasn't had the intellect, the moral fortitude to change the law, to say no.
Am I going to see a book that says how to be Canadian for idiots?
Well, indeed, how to be a liberal for idiots. And I want to say this. Behind me, that's a suitcase that my father came to Canada with nothing. He came to Canada with nothing, no language, nothing. And Canada accepted him in after the war. So I always keep it in my office to remind myself of where I'm from. That is what Canada's given me, has given our family that opportunity. And there weren't all these grants, how to cheat the system. There weren't this separation of, you mentioned the Islamic social services, but these different groups. And just on that, we see Wab Kinew, amazingly, appointing 12 Muslim people to put together a program on Islamophobia in the middle of the biggest anti-Semitism crisis in Canadian and Western history. I'm not in favor of Islamophobia and I don't even like the term, but I'm not in favor of anyone attacking anyone because they're Muslim or Christian or Jewish or Hindu or Sikh or whatever. That's atrocious. But the idea, instead of creating a global committee, how do you fight hate, with Christians and Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and all that coming together to say we have a real problem here. How do we address it? He divides, just like Carney divides, and it's really it's so detrimental to what Canada's supposed to be. The guy, by the way, is Mark Wiseman, is Mr. Carney's pick to be ambassador to the U.S. And you're right. He's a guy who said we should have 100 million people. And he's one of the authors of terrible liberal programming. Does somebody think he's going to get along with the Trump administration? Yeah. Maybe economically, that there's something there, but really that's not even accurate, because we know that Mr. Carney's never going to touch supply management or anything else, which the Americans actually rightfully want, because that's a tax on poor people in Canada. So anyway, back to immigration. I would only say that that Canada, it seems like it's deliberately, it seems really deliberate that they're not fixing the system, because it could be fixed. And Royce, you talked about it's important that we take in basically refugees or asylum seekers if they're legitimate. Okay, some, and I say that being the child of one, but the fact is that the way we're doing it now, to have separate little segregated schools of foreign conflict importers, I don't think so.
Yeah, but here's my problem with it, right? Is I've always kind of as a child was told, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, kind of thing. So when you create these programs for, they're going to teach in school, right? Islamophobia in school. They want to teach that in school. Well, then why aren't you teaching one for Christianity, that you can't be against Christianity? Why aren't you teaching one? I mean, listen. Not a lot of people like Saskatchewan, so maybe we have to have a special program throughout schools for Saskatchewan, right? You can't be mad at Saskatchewan, people from Saskatchewan. You've got to respect Saskatchewan. It's getting out of control, and that's where I believe the division starts. Now, the whole Saskatchewan thing, maybe I can see that. That's fine. But there is a bit of a problem with how governments are handling this, and they're doing it. I can tell you, as somebody that sat in a party and has ran for election, they're doing it for votes. They're doing it because they think it makes them look good on social media, and if they tell you any different, it's wrong. They're doing it for votes. They're doing it for the social media stuff, and they think that that's what gets them elected. And whose fault is that? That's our fault.
It's even worse. Sorry, I'll do one more point. No. In schools, they're setting aside classrooms for Muslim prayer. Do they do that for Christian prayer or any other prayer? And if they do, I don't care if it's for Jewish prayer or anything else. Stop it. Absolutely stop it. That's not Canada. This segregated, failed multiculturalism is not Canada, and it will break apart what is Canada. We already see Canada being torn apart in different directions. Royce, what do you think?
Well, we should probably have programs in schools that encourage hatred of Saskatchewan rather than discourage it. But the government's
just jealousy.
Please, for the record, we all don't share Royce's opinion, so.
I'm just joking. Saskatchewan's fine. The governments, they fund different religious organizations, different religious initiatives, community groups, churches, mosques, that are doing good work basically in the community. They're civil society groups, and governments chipping in money can do a lot of good and help them.
Sorry,
yes.
The entire time I was in politics, I never saw a dime go to a Christian church.
Okay, well, that's a problem. But I really don't mind that kind of thing. I do have concern about this program that was announced in Manitoba. I can only imagine the people that are going to be writing that, where they're going to come from, what that would look like. So I would keep a close eye on that. And we always want to look out for unintended consequences. That one thing we've learned over the last few years is when things get pushed too hard by people, particularly on the political left, you get backlash. And that's the real concern with immigration. It's also a concern with reconciliation to some extent. But as an example, we talked about a story from a couple of weeks ago in from British Columbia. You had a bunch of people that were arrested for extortion. They were engaging in extortion of businesses in Surrey and the Lower Mainland. They were all in Canada on visitor permits. Some of them were here on student visas. Apparently, they were balancing going to class with firebombing and shooting businesses in Surrey. They were arrested. All of them immediately applied for asylum in Canada. And so now there's a 4-year asylum hearing. So, you know, when you have people that are I mean,
So
this
are they
is
out on bail?
destroys confidence. I
So
don't
are
know, probably. But, you know, if you are concerned about a well-ordered immigration system, a well-ordered refugee system, this is the kind of thing that destroys public confidence in it. This is the kind of thing that encourages backlash. It's the kind of thing that governments need to act on if we want to avoid this happening in the future. And this comes back to the whole theme of the show. It's lily-livered politicians that aren't willing to make the hard decisions to fix things before they well and truly go to pot in the next few years.
Royce, I agree with your last point, but I want to disagree with 2 points. One is Jimmy Pattison said that one of the pathways to success in life, very wealthy guy, one of the wealthiest guys in Canada, he said, is marry a woman from Saskatchewan. So I want to say that first. He publicly said that.
Really?
That's what he said. My father married a woman from Saskatchewan, and I don't know for better or for worse. But so
did he marry someone from Saskatchewan?
Mr. Pattison?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's the evidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yes. So number 2 is governments have no business funding any religious institutions whatsoever, in my view. I don't think they should be spending a dime on any of this stuff. I don't care if it's a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, nothing. If people want to contribute, they already get a favorable tax treatment. That's more than enough. Government has no businesses. Less government is more government, is better government. That's what we've learned over many, many years, in my view. Not that government should be saying these are do-gooders, so let's fork over millions of dollars to fix up a church or a synagogue or a mosque or something. It's ridiculous.
But the truth is they do it.
I know they do it. It's atrocious. And I don't care if it's my community or your community, Kevin, or yours, Royce. It's wrong.
I disagree. This is a debate that we're having between conservatives online in Canada right now. It's the extent to which government should support conservative causes, use the power of the state to support conservative causes versus just getting out of it entirely. I think that if there's religious organizations that are doing great work in their community, they're important civil society organizations, and government can help by chipping in a little bit of money. It's far better to be doing that than to spend it on some of the ridiculous things that government spend it on instead. But
isn't government spending money by giving tax credits for what you donate to a religious facility?
Yeah, it's enough. Exactly, sure. Kevin. Yeah. That's enough.
I mean, here's my problem from a guy that was in politics. There's nobody that I know in office that's qualified to be picking winners and losers. And that's 100%. What's happening. You know, politicians are picking winners and losers, not based on credibility, not based on evidence, not based on ROI. They're picking winners and losers based on who's going to come out and vote for them in the next election. So I disagree, Royce, and I don't normally disagree with you on anything, but I think there's a wonderful tax credit for that, 100%. I think that is more than enough that the government, because that is the government giving money. And there has to be a line between church and state. And what's happening is that there is no line right now. We're blurring that line by giving it to certain groups and not other groups. And that's the problem. I want to ask you this to kind of wrap up the show, because I'm starting to think that now my story should have been, lily-livered politicians as the biggest story for 2025. I wonder, which is kind of is, right? I just said they did nothing, but I like the lily-livered part too. I should have added that. But do you think that these politicians know this is happening? That they have to know what's happening, and they're allowing it to happen because it keeps people focused off the real problem, and the real problem is that they don't know what they're doing. Right? You had Carney scared people to death about Trump.
Yeah.
That's how he got elected. I mean, like it or not, he got elected because everyone thought, oh, this guy's going to be able to bulldoze Trump. No.
Yeah, and I think there's an argument to be made there. I mean, I think the do nothing argument, it applies really well to Manitoba. It's very hard to figure out what the government actually did in the last year. They were in the news constantly.
I don't want to cut you off, but they put a liquor trailer at the new Costco.
Yes, yes. Well, that's the one exception, the crowning achievement of the government. But the government was in the news all the time. The premier was in the news. He said all sorts of things. He got quoted constantly. When you look at the legislative, like what's the record? It's actually not a whole lot happening there. And by the way, Kevin, it's okay that we're disagreeing. I think we need more disagreement on this show. We need more heat. We need more heat, more conflict between us. So I'll pick up this issue again in the future.
Fair enough.
So, I just want to point out that Kevin and I are in the majority. Royce, you're in the minority on that one. So we win. But just on this, I want to know, when does a government take responsibility for its ineptitude and inaction? When do liberals finally stand up and say, we got this policy wrong? I went to a debate between a conservative member of parliament and a liberal at the University of Winnipeg back I guess, earlier this month. And Mr. Lamoureux was there for the liberals, and he's shouting and he's a loud voice, taking no responsibility for failed policy after failed policy after failed policy. Had he stood up and said, you know what, we got it wrong on bail. Mr. Trudeau, when we were empowering Mr. Trudeau, we got it wrong. Mr. Carney which I don't agree with that he's fixed it, but is fixing it. Had he said that, it would be one thing. But they take zero responsibility. So to your question, Kevin, do they know what they're doing? Or do they know that they don't know what they're doing, is maybe the better way to put it. The answer is, I think that they're doing what is consistent with their philosophy. I come back always to Mr. Carney's book, where he said what he thinks. And unless he was lying through that, which I don't believe he was, that's how he thinks. It's consistent with the leftist thinking at Oxford and in universities that have been infiltrated. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think that to some extent, or the Premier of Manitoba is much the same. Other premiers, Mr. Eby in BC is much the same. We look at his history, his biography of his protests and actions, and it's all consistent. And it's failed policies over and over and over again. The question is, how far will the Canadian public allow it to go?
Apparently
If there's an election in the spring or summer, which there still might be, it's a really important, I think, a critical question, because if they win again, I think you'll see a mass exodus of certain population groups from Canada. They're already looking. Many have moved their businesses. Many are looking at moving their businesses. I know, parenthetically, what we all know is that Mr. Carney moved his business before he became Prime Minister to the United States. That's what we're going to see. And we're going to see an increase in separatism across Quebec, Alberta, Saskatchewan. And I think
the vote's coming. The vote is coming in Alberta. That's a done deal, right? The vote is coming.
They're doing another
absolutely going to happen. So whether you like it or not, the country could be facing separation in 2026. And if it comes in Alberta, Quebec's not going to be long behind it, and neither is Saskatchewan. So the movement in Saskatchewan is already starting to pick up, and the movement in Quebec, we already know, is stronger than it's ever been. But in Alberta, it's happening. It's a done deal.
I think that's the story of 2025, the birth of a new separatism, or separatisms, plural, in Quebec and in the West. And I'm very fearful for my country, or what's left of it. I think that's the story of 2025. And it's a poison that's planted by, frankly, Mr. Carney and the Liberals, and that whole way of thinking that's just completely corrosive. So I'm hopeful. I always say I trust the electorate that they will figure it out. They got fooled last time. I'm hopeful. Some would say, and if some people in comments want to say that I'm being naive, you're right, but I'm choosing to be until I'm proven otherwise. And because I think my Canada, our Canada, yours, Kevin, yours, Royce, our Canada is worth fighting for.
Yeah, excuse me, the separation stuff will be the big story of 2026 and 2027. There's certainly a referendum coming in Alberta. There's probably a 90% chance that we'll get one in Quebec as well. And people need to ask themselves, so do they want Mark Carney to lead the federalist forces in these referendum campaigns? Is he the one that you want making the arguments in favor of these places staying in Canada? The guy that can't get a deal with the Americans, he can't pass a bill in Parliament, he can't discipline his cabinet. Is that the person that you want leading those efforts? Because these are actually existential challenges to Canada that are coming in the next few years. This will be the most difficult, the most divisive period in the country's history. 2 separation referendums in 2 years? That's shocking. Why isn't everyone talking about this?
Well, nobody's talking about it, and that's my biggest problem. It's not just that. If you look, the Bank of Canada governor, Bank of Canada came out and said the negotiations for CUSMA, or whatever you would like to call it, are dangerous. They're risky. We are on a financial cliff right now. Nobody wants to admit that because they think we can just keep printing money and everything is going to be okay. Sooner or later, someone's got to pay the tab. We can't just keep borrowing money. We can't just keep printing money, because when you print it, you devalue our money. Just go back and look at what happened to Greece and et cetera. So here we are with the former or the parliamentary budget officer saying that he thought the budget was terrible and we're at risk, and there's a big risk there with the debt. And now you have the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of Canada, coming out saying, look, we're standing on a fiscal cliff going into the new year. So if you get hit with separation, or that even if once they announce when the vote will be, I don't know if it's at the next Alberta election, nobody's going to be investing in Canada yet. Nobody's going to pour money into this country. They're going to wait and see. And that's going to happen in Quebec. So you're right. I think the biggest story of 2026, and I'm not trying to be a fear monger, because I think if you get the right people in politics, they can fix it. You need people in there that are going to fix the problems and stop being a politician. Stop playing all of this, social engineering and all that kind of stuff. Just fix the country. Do your job, because that's my biggest fear too. Is in 2026 is that what if they end CUSMA? What if Alberta separates? We don't get any more transfer payments if Alberta goes, folks. None.
Yeah. I don't think it's fear-mongering. We have many indications that Trump is willing to let that agreement go, or to negotiate on very unfavorable terms for us. We know that Alberta and Quebec are very likely going to have referendums. We know that there's a court ruling calling into question private ownership of land. What do you think? Who do you think is going to invest in this country? We're going to get some drunk. You'd have to be
millionaire.
You'd have to be kind of off your rocker. I mean, the government. One of the government's jobs is to create the conditions for this kind of investment. You can't just bury your head in the sand on all this stuff, and I think that is happening a lot. The reason people aren't talking about Alberta is because Alberta, for most Canadians, is this kind of exotic place that they don't understand. They think it's just a province of whiners. They're going to have their little tantrum, and then that'll be the end of it. I don't know. I mean,
this separation group is well funded.
Yeah. So, I mean, the support for separation is pretty low in Alberta, but I don't know, like once you start talking about it, once you start debating it, once you start thinking about it, suddenly it's the same thing in Quebec. Once it becomes a real possibility, you start thinking about it, you start thinking, well, why would we stay in Canada? That becomes a question. I don't know. I for my whole life, I watched the separation movement in Alberta just spin its tires. It was kind of a rump movement. But in the last few years, if it's actually a question, actually a referendum, there's actually a pathway to something different, I wouldn't bet either way. I'd have some real concern.
Elected officials in other countries are meeting with this group.
Yeah, let's bear in mind
being
that
laughed at.
Let's bear in mind that, like, the referendum which will happen, and there'll be two in Alberta, because the premier's talking about one on immigration as well. So when the referendum happens, that's just stage one. There then has to be negotiation. This is going to be a long, blood-leaking sort of process, a difficult process that's going to be happening if the separatists in Alberta win the election. And I agree with Royce, once the conversation starts, and they'll see, on the one hand, this is the equation, on the one hand, they will be one of the wealthiest countries in the world with the lowest taxes, the most resources. They can get their oil out through the northwestern United States, or maybe even up through Alaska or whatever. There are different opportunities for them to get their oil and gas to Tidewater. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, it's what I said before, is that love of Canada, of what Canada's supposed to be, what it once was or ought to have been, will be weighed against that. I don't think that Mr. Carney's the guy to lead the fight, for a variety of reasons that Royce touched upon. And that's a real problem that Albertans will have to face. And Kevin, you've said it, I've said it before. Look at Manitoba, for example, and the Maritime provinces. Just so we're clear, Manitoba got, I think it was over $5 billion in transfer payments, the second biggest outside of Quebec of any jurisdiction in Canada, based on Alberta, Saskatchewan, and a little bit of BC. That's where we get our money. Our deficit already was, I think, approximately twice of what the government estimated. And it would be even higher but for transfer payments. So imagine if they're cut in half, what that would mean.
But put it into perspective. We don't have that many people that live in Manitoba.
Right.
Yeah. Like, how much less people in the city of Calgary?
Right. So I'm just going to get to that too, which is this notion of capital is fleeing Canada. It's not coming in. When you look at the capital investment per worker in Canada, it's almost a half of that of what happens in the US. And I think it's about a third or two-thirds of the OECD. We are so low on that. Capital is flowing out, not in. And again, you can't build an economy, a future based on that. And this nonsensical notion Mr. Carney talks about, separating so-called investment from deficit spending. It's all deficit spending, and it's all coming from all of us, those of us who pay taxes. And there's a limit to how much money the government can take before people say, and you see this online, I've seen tons of this online, people who are Canadian who move to low tax jurisdictions to say, life is so much better. Yeah. Life is just so much better. This is super detrimental.
I think that gets back to, we'll wrap it up here, but I think it gets back to the theme of the show, right? Biggest story in 2025 is nothing. The government's doing nothing, because
it's not nothing.
It is nothing, because I listen to
separation.
Well, no, 2026 will be separation, but I don't see any politician taking the separation talks seriously. They're ignoring it. They feel they put their head in the sand and they don't talk about it. It will just simply go away, and it won't go away. And if you look at all the other things, the negotiations with the United States, we haven't gotten better. We've gotten worse. The relationship has gotten worse over time.
Yeah.
And it's going to continue to get worse. And yes, you blame it on Donald Trump and all that. That's fine. But the reality is, what are we going to do for Canada? And what the biggest, most richest province, if that's grammatically correct, is going to walk away, Alberta, and nobody's doing anything. And then you've got like premiers like Wab Kinew rubbing their hands, saying life is great. We've got a liquor trailer by a Costco, and we're doing this and we're doing that, but nothing's actually happening. So I don't know, Royce. I'll let you close off the show.
Well, thank you. Imagine Alberta. It's been shut out of power in federal politics for 10 years now. We had a government that was actively and openly hostile to that province's one big commodity, discouraged development. What happens if Mark Carney backroom deals his way into a majority government and all that? We're stuck with him for 4 years. What if we have a federal election and people in other parts of the country electing another Liberal government? What is that going to lead to in Alberta? I mean, The more I talk, the more concerned I am. Maybe I should stop talking about Alberta.
Wait, guys, I want to end on a positive note. It's the end of 2025, and it's, people will see this, I guess, of New Year's. And I want to end on a positive note. And I'm sort of racking my brains. I'm throwing it out to you guys. When I look at what Ronald Reagan was running against with Jimmy Carter's negativism and his nihilism and all of that, and Mr. Reagan pointed out all the problems going on back then in the U.S., but also gave an optimistic view of the city on the hill, as he called it, the shining city on the hill, a positive image of what the United States could be and once was. And I think that's what we have to do, maybe not on this show, but think about and Mr. Poilievre has to do this, I think, that positive image of what Canada is supposed to be. He does it a little bit. We have to do it more. He should be doing it if he wants to win an election, and hopefully he will one day. But we need to be doing that too. The positive image of what Canada should have been, should be, and can be. So, guys,
that takes leadership, Lawrence. That takes leadership. And in the last year, we never saw any of that. We didn't see any of that.
I'm inviting us to do it. Kevin, I'm inviting us to do it right now.
Well, I think we should. We can do it. I mean, Canada, we know Canada can be great. We know it once was. I mean, at one time, not that long ago, the Canadian dollar was, at par and sometimes a little bit worth more than the United States. But, we've gotten a far way from that now. But because we're electing people based on social issues. We're not electing people based on running the country and protecting us and creating the environment, as Royce said, for businesses. We're not. That's what I always thought government was supposed to do. Build the launching pad, right? We'll build the launching pad, and the people can come in and build their businesses. They're gonna thrive here. But how is that going to happen in this country right now? If you have $1 billion to invest, are you going to invest it in Canada today? And I'm not saying that to be negative, but are you going to invest it in Canada today? Land rights are an issue. Nobody knows what's going to happen there. Now airspace is going to be challenged. Can you go through certain airspace? Are you going to have to go around? Are we going to have floating signs, do not enter in the air so that people can't pass by it? We've got, provinces talking about leaving the union. They want to be their own country. And it's growing and growing and growing. And you've got banks. Did you ever think you would wake up one day knowing that a bank wouldn't give you a mortgage based on the fact that your land might not be yours?
Yeah, I think Lawrence makes a good point. But it's not just us; it's people out there that are unhappy with how things are going in this country. And the question we have to ask people is, what are you doing about it?
Right.
Are you a member of a political party? If you have some spare money, are you donating it to the party that's actually going to address these things? Are you actually, if you're a conservative, are you having a say in your local association? You're advocating policies that are actually going to address the concerns here or the things you're concerned about. Just commenting on Twitter is not good enough. There are things we can do. And if you're unhappy with the way things are going, there are definitely things you should be doing as a result of that.
I would just like to see people vote. I just want to see more people vote.
Yeah, that's the basic.
You don't have to get involved with politics. You don't have to donate any money. You don't have to be a member of a party. But please, please think about how you're going to vote and get out and vote. Don't just throw it away and say, my vote doesn't matter. Because I think in 2026, a vote is going to be the most valuable asset we have in this country. It's going to be the most important thing you do in your life in 2026 is cast a vote, whether you're in Alberta, whether you're in Quebec, whether you're in Manitoba. I think that that's going to be the most critical thing of 2026. Anyway,
I agree with. I just want to say I agree with you. Intelligent voting is critical. I know there's some people in comments who say voting mattered, it would be legal and it doesn't matter. I disagree with them respectfully. You're right, Kevin. Intelligent voting, principled voting, voting for the Canada that we should have and can have, of lower taxes, economic development, respect for all people, not just the loudest, most annoying group possible, peace, order, good government. Those are the things we have to strive for. We can. And on that note, I say to everyone and to you guys, Happy New Year. All the best for 2026, despite the threats and dangers. Let's keep up the good fight, guys.
Hey, Happy New Year, Lawrence, and Happy New Year, Royce.
Happy New Year.
Remember, like and follow our show. We would certainly appreciate it. Tell your friends about it. And what is it? Smash the button. Smash the follow button or the like button. Smash one of them.
Both.
It's a new
all
year,
the buttons.
so have fun. Smash away. Like the program. Share it with your friends. We'll see you next week on Inside Politics.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegsun.com for more.